And we're starting with the breaking update that we're getting to you on the top story here on 5 Live. It's been 24 hours now since young Indian Navy pilot Commander Nishant Singh has remained missing after his fighter crashed in the Arabian Sea last evening. It was at 5 p.m. yesterday, in fact, that his fighter, operating off the INS Vikramaditya aircraft carrier out in the Arabian Sea, had crashed with 2 pilots on board. One of the pilots, the trainee pilot, was recovered safely, but young Commander Nishant Singh remains missing. Search operations are on in full swing. There are aircraft, ships and helicopters that are scouring the Arabian Sea looking for young Commander Nishant Singh. It's been 24 hours now and the search is still very much on. Very tense moments for the squadron, his family and pilots on board INS Vikramaditya. It's a tense search that began immediately after that fighter jet crashed into the Arabian Sea after taking off from INS Vikramaditya, the Indian Navy's only aircraft carrier. The search is on for Navy fighter pilot Commander Nishant Singh far out in the Arabian Sea. His jet crashed at about 5 p.m. during a routine operational flight in the Arabian Sea. Commander Nishant has been missing now for over 24 hours. He is a qualified flight instructor or QFI and a highly experienced MiG-29 pilot. The trainee pilot who was flying with Nishant was successfully rescued by helicopters shortly after the mishap last evening, but there is no sign so far of Commander Nishant. For available information, the 2 pilots took off from INS Vikramaditya in their jet in the late afternoon yesterday, far out in the Arabian Sea. Shortly thereafter, citing an emergency, according to a preliminary Indian Navy statement, the pilots ditched the aircraft. That is an uncontrolled descent into the sea. It is unclear whether the second pilot managed to eject. That is Nishant, the man you see on your screen. Helicopters and ships are currently scouring the surface of the Arabian Sea in the hope that the young pilot has survived. If he did manage to eject, Nishant's flight suit has flotation devices as well as a personal emergency transmitter. At the time of this broadcast, there is still no sign of the young pilot. Part of the MiG-29K fleet located at INS Hansa in Goa, Nishant, like many other pilots, has been stationed on board the INS Vikramaditya during its current patrol in the Arabian Sea. The aircraft carrier was recently, remember, deployed in the Malabar exercise as well. And joining me live now to speak about this particular issue, and as we pray for some good news, a miracle. It's been 24 hours and things are not looking good, but some kind of a miracle that Commander Nishant has survived, in the water somehow. We have with us Captain D.K. Sharma, I beg your pardon, who's a former spokesperson of the Indian Navy. He has been the spokesperson of the Indian Navy through previous accidents, and he knows what communication is all about, but he's also very well technically aware of what goes into such accidents and how they are investigated. Also with me is my colleague, India Today's Sandeep Unithan, who is very well versed in all things Indian Navy. You couldn't have 2 better voices on a situation of this kind. I'm going to go to both my guests in just a moment, but before that, a lot of people will be wondering, do naval pilots who have to ditch at sea have any special equipment that will allow them to float, allow their locations to come out to rescue crews? I'm going to take you through that particular information now. Now, this is what a flight suit really looks like. It's a rough idea of what a flight suit looks like. May not be exact, but it looks like this. Now, this thing, which looks like a travel pillow almost around the neck of the naval pilot, is called a May vest, and that acts as a flotation device. It can be inflated, and that provides flotation once the pilot is in the water. And located inside the May vest is also a personal locator transmitter, which is there on each pilot. So there is a beacon which sends out a signal drawing search and rescue crews towards the pilot. The MiG-29K fighter itself has an emergency locator beacon on its tail, and these are emergency locators that are designed to activate in salt water or during any kind of if there is a rough jolt beyond a certain amount of strength. The emergency locator beacons are designed to actually to activate. Now let's tell you the sequence of events. What really happened when this aircraft ditched at sea. Okay, this is what ditching at sea actually means. It's an extremely hazardous maneuver. The aircraft, we still don't know what went wrong with the aircraft, but it's done in an emergency situation. So instead of the aircraft coming back and landing on the aircraft carrier or at shore, or if a suitable landing site is too far, or you're out of fuel or whatever it is, you have to sort of land in the water. Now, whether this was a smooth landing, on the surface of the water, or an uncontrolled sort of descent into the water is not known, but a ditch at sea is only a last resort. The pilots could have attempted a controlled ditching, or it may have been uncontrolled. All of that is not known just yet. What we do know is that they did ditch at sea, and only one pilot was recovered. Captain Sharma, to you first. In what kind of circumstances, sir, would the pilots have had to ditch at sea? This was a MiG-29K operating off the INS Vikramaditya. We'll come to the safety aspects in a bit, but under what circumstances would they have had to ditch, sir?
Shiv, first of all, my heart goes out to the family of the missing pilot, and also to the squadron pilots and who give their very best. Let me tell you, this is not a joke.
Yes.
Flying at sea from an aircraft carrier from 160 meters, 170 meters, you need very, very, top quality skills.
Yes.
And Commander Nishant, being a QFI, was a revered man. He's one of the best available to us, and that is why he was taking a trainee with him. Now, what has gone wrong? That is, you have listed out a lot of things, but let's not jump to any conclusion, because it's a very tricky maneuver. What has happened? I gather from my sources that the MiG-29 took off from Vikramaditya last evening, and was on a training sortie. So whether she was heading back to VKD or she was coming to double him, we don't know. And there is no call also. That is what I gather. So a very tough time for both of them.
Yes, absolutely.
And one of them has been recovered, which means the chances of the recovery of the second are very high. But the only grim part is that now 24 hours have gone past.
Yes.
And insofar as ditching, you are saying, ditching normally it gets connected with choppers. Here it seems to be some kind of malfunction. Now where it has happened, it will be too preposterous for me to point a finger at anything.
Yes, sir.
Let's keep quiet on this till the time the inquiry comes out, because I'm sure Navy will be able to recover the aircraft. Navy will be able to recover Nishant wherever he is, and I only hope and pray that he's fine and alive.
I'm truly hoping for that.
First point.
Truly hoping for that. Sandeep, 24 hours is a long time. As we all know, and like Captain Sharma said, naval aviators are the best of the best, because they're flying in already dangerous situations. They're flying over sea where they don't have a plan B. So it is a little disconcerting that one pilot has been recovered and the other pilot is still missing. This is despite the adequate safety gear that is available, and we can confirm that the Indian Navy pilot and the aircraft did have adequate safety equipment. Sandeep.
Absolutely, Shiv. The Indian Navy's fleet air arm is the sharp edge of the Navy's sword, and for the reasons that you mentioned, I mean, they have the best of the best flying those MiG-29s way out at sea. And this, unfortunately, is one of the pitfalls of fighter flying, Shiv, way out there at sea, where several things could go wrong, and you really don't have a backup plan. You're in the middle of nowhere, literally. You just have the aircraft carrier out there. If anything goes wrong, it's just the sea beneath you, and that is the biggest challenge that fighter pilots have to face when they're out at sea. So this is one of those pitfalls. Now, the Navy equips them for these kind of emergencies. You mentioned the May Vest that they're all equipped with. That's a personal flotation device that automatically inflates when they hit the water. In addition to that, they have something called the SAR beacon, which is something like a brick-sized beacon that fits under the May-West, and that is programmed to go off as soon as it hits the water, and it emits a radio signal that can be picked up by satellites and aircraft around. And there have been, in fact, instances where SAR beacons have gone off while they were inside ships, and it's so powerful that emergency signals have been triggered off. I mean, that's how effective that beacon is supposed to be. But we don't know exactly what's happened in this case. We're awaiting further details, and one just hopes that that brave pilot makes it back home.
I'm going to talk in just a moment with both of our guests about what happens, once the aircraft hits water. What is that experience like? What are the procedures? Before that, we've just put together, and Captain Sharma is absolutely right. There is a lot about this mishap that we don't know, but I've just tried to piece together in general the sequence of events as we can understand them so far. So let's just take a look at the beginnings of what may have happened. First, the aircraft took off from the INS Vikramaditya. It took off from the INS Vikramaditya. There was some kind of mishap that happened in the air. The aircraft ditched in the sea. It crashed into the sea. We don't know yet whether there was an ejection or a partial ejection. We don't know that. But we do know that one of the pilots happened to be rescued by an Indian Navy Dhruv helicopter. But the second pilot has not been found so far. His location is unknown. He has not been located also so far. Captain Sharma, with the emergency locator beacon there, like you said, that when one pilot has already been recovered, the chances of the other pilot being recovered, should be fairly high. But 24 hours later, it paints a different kind of picture. Once the pilot is in the water, sir, I'm just taking a sort of best case scenario. Once the pilot is in the water, is it easy for search and rescue teams to zero in on him? Because it's, of course, a wide, large area to search, but there is that emergency location device.
Shiv, 2-3 things before coming down to the drill. First of all our pilots, especially the pilots who are flying overseas, they on a very regular basis, they go for their training to Kochi, and they are put through the paces that should this thing happen, how it is to be done. Now coming down to the part of ejection. Now when you have ejected, you have left the aircraft, then you will certainly touch water. Now before touching water, or as soon as you touch the water, you have to disconnect the parachute so that you should not be entangled in the parachute.
Yes.
Number 2, you also have to activate the personal locator beacon. This I confirmed from few pilots. There are 3 frequencies on that.
Yes.
That is the UVHF frequencies. Ultra high frequency is connected with the satellites, which is the 406.025 megahertz. It will straight away through satellite, transmit to the SARCC coordination centers the exact GPS position of the pilot or the May-West, wherever that May-West is. So that is, and the other 2 frequencies are 121.5 and 243 megahertz. So all these things will get activated should the pilot be in senses and activate that mechanism. So now you're understanding.
Yes,
he is connected to the parachute. He has to activate and energize this PLB, personal locator beacon. And insofar as ELT, the emergency locator transmitter, and the sonar location beacon, they will get activated the moment they touch salt water.
Right.
So I hope everything is working and we are able to zero on to Nishant, because if he has not activated this, then it is a different story.
Right.
So we do not know what was his situation when he ejected. Was he in his senses? Because, normally it's a very dangerous maneuver.
Yes.
Ejecting from the cockpit, you can hurt your spine, you can, anything can happen. And God willing, we don't want to talk about that because it's very scary.
Absolutely.
And we just hope that Nishant is fine and, somehow we are able to locate him.
Absolutely.
But all these things are very, very dangerous. And you saw, and the hope is because the second pilot, the trainee pilot, is out.
Yes.
So I'm sure Nishant is somewhere around, and hopefully we'll find him.
The number of variables in such a situation, Sandeep, boggle the mind. We had these very neat sort of illustrations depicting what has happened. But what may have actually happened could have been, there could have been so many different things. Like Captain Sharma is saying, there could have been an injury during ejection. There could have been a partial ejection. And let me just be very clear here on India Today that we here are praying and hoping for the best outcome in this particular scenario. We are praying for Nishant and we're praying for the crews that are looking for Nishant. But Sandeep, the variables in such a dangerous situation cannot be ignored.
Absolutely, Shiv. And in fact, as Captain Sharma mentioned, fighter pilots go to Cochin very routinely and they're put through the paces to prepare them for all these eventualities, especially the thing of this modular water egress capsule that they're given, which is when they're hit, they're put into the water and they're trained to, come out of crashed aircraft. They're simulated, all kinds of possible scenarios are played out where, if their aircraft hits the water, what they have to do, how they have to cut the parachute loose and swim to the surface. The entire drill is factored in. And this again comes back to my earlier point, Shiv, the fact that naval fighter pilots have the most risk. They face the most risk among all combat aviation in the Indian Armed Forces. And it just tells you the perils of flying fighters way out at sea when you have no backup. You just have one aircraft carrier. Once you leave it, there's no plan B to, divert your aircraft. And that's what makes, carrier-based aviation so challenging.
Absolutely. It is incredibly challenging. In fact, even while we were deciding to do this story today at 5 p.m., the one thought in my mind was there is so much about this incident that we don't know. The one thing we do know is that this pilot is missing, but everything else is absolutely hazy right now. Stay with me, gentlemen. The aircraft that was lost at sea yesterday happened to be the fourth MiG-29K, which is the only fighter in service with the Indian Navy right now that has been lost in the last few years. The first one crashed on the 3rd of January in 2018. It caught fire at the Goa airport. Since then, there have been 3 more that have crashed. There was the most recent crash, as a matter of fact, was earlier this year itself. In February this year, there was a crash again in Goa. Both pilots at that time, one of the pilots happens to be the commanding officer of the unit that Nishant happens to be from. He had ejected from an aircraft in just earlier this year. Last year there was one as well. So this is a disturbing situation as far as the aircraft, but that's not what we are talking about right now. Like both of our guests have said just now, this is a seriously dangerous business. Fighter aviation by its very nature is a risky business, and fighter aviation at sea is even more risky. I want to pull up the graphic once again because it's important for me to get this absolutely clear of what the pilot has on his body when he is in the cockpit. Naval fighter pilots, and I'm showing this to you for the second time because this is important. This thing called a May vest is a May vest, I beg your pardon, has a flotation device inside it. So when the pilot hits the water, that thing basically inflates and keeps them above water. I mean, pilots can stay afloat. They're naval pilots. They're highly trained anyway to stay afloat and swim as long as necessary. But it's a flotation device, obviously, to assist them. And inside the May vest is that emergency locator transmitter. Captain Sharma, how difficult is search and rescue? We've got a situation now where there are ships, there are fixed-wing aircrafts from shore, I imagine. There are helicopters from the INS Vikramaditya and other ships as well that are all in coordination searching that particular area. How difficult is search and rescue in such a situation, sir?
Shiv, you're asking a very, very tricky question. Search and rescue, the amount of assets which have been deployed. So it's very clear, the intention of the Navy is very clear that we will not leave a single square inch unmarked. Now, having said that, the point is there should be some flotsam, there should be some idea where it is. There was fuel in the aircraft, so some patch should show up somewhere, and we know from where we picked up the second pilot. So basically the area is localized. There is no doubt in my mind. And the ship was there because the MiG-29 has taken off from there. So we know the general area, but now we are pinpointing towards Nishant. In my scheme of things, looking for the aircraft is secondary. Primary is Commander Nishant right
Yes.
now. And we just hope and pray that he's floating somewhere and his gear has worked. Because his parachute is there, he himself is there, he's wearing a May vest, and I hope the May vest is activated and the PLB is working. So all these combinations, along with the ships, the aircraft, the smaller ships, and all the satellite, if the PLB is working and the satellite positioning of that beacon is getting transmitted.
Yes.
So now you can see the complexity that in the water, there has to be flotsam, there has to be oil spill, there has to be a lot of other things, some small debris here and there because the aircraft has entered water. So all this, nothing, we are not finding anything. So that means there is something more than what meets the eye.
Yes, yes.
So let's see.
I'm just, Sandeep, one final question to you. This is the kind of situation I'm hoping for. As we pray for a good outcome to this search and rescue operation, Sandeep, is it possible? I know this is, a difficult question when we know so little, but Sandeep, is it possible that maybe his emergency locator transmitter isn't working, or he may have drifted away from the place where the aircraft actually ditched, and therefore, as the hours have passed, it's become more difficult? Or does a pilot have some way to indicate where his location is?
Well, Shiv, we really don't know as of now. And,
Yeah.
I wouldn't like to speculate too much on this based on the available information. But
Yes.
I'd like to mention the fact that how challenging search and rescue at sea itself is. If you remember, not so long ago, 4 years back to be precise, we were all looking for that AN-32 that flew from mainland India towards the Andaman and Nicobar Islands.
Yes.
And that was the most complex search and air search rescue launched on the seas in Indian history, and we still could not find that aircraft. I mean, so that again tells you how challenging it is to locate anything out at sea.
Yes.
It's such a major task, and that was a search that used submarines, warships. There were aircraft, 2-3 different types of aircraft, long-range patrol aircraft, and all of that. But despite that, we couldn't find that aircraft. That aircraft continues to remain missing. We can only hope that, given the circumstances in which Commander Nishant went down, like Captain Sharma mentioned, the fact is that the general area is known and localized. We can hope to get some good news about that very soon.
Well, thank you, Captain Sharma and Sandeep, for joining me on this. It's a grim story, but I would like to say that I believe it is in public interest, because this is a soldier who is out there, who's missing. People want to know about his well-being and his safety, and people are interested in how our assets are being used to bring this brave young pilot back to safety. We continue with our prayers. Our thoughts are with the family, with the Navy, the squadron, and especially the crews that are out there looking for young Commander Nishant. Thank you for joining us on this particular discussion. We'll keep our viewers track. That's my promise to you. We'll keep you track on that story.